Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another exciting episode on the channel. Hope you guys are doing well today, and welcome to episode 10 of the Kotlin Messenger series. And today's video, I'm gonna try to wrap up this entire series by filling out all of the missing features inside of our current application. So without further ado, let me kind of show you what exactly I want to do in today's video. And so basically in the very last lesson, we ended up being able to pull in all of the latest messages for the currently logged in user, right? So this is kind of what it looks like. And we're missing a couple of things for each one of these rows. The first thing that we're missing is the profile image view for the user that we're actually messaging, right? So instead of having just the star, we would like to pull in the image in this circular image view guy on the right side, right over there. And in addition to that, why don't we also fill in the username with the correct name of the actual user, such as Jon Snow or Jaime Lannister. Okay, so once we are able to finish that feature up, we're going to also fix the nav bar to include the application icon, kind of like that, as well as the couple of icons for writing a new message right here, as well as signing out all the way on the top right over there. Okay, so those are the couple of things we are going to work on in today's video. Why don't we go ahead and get started with Android Studio right now. Alrighty guys, welcome back to good old Android Studio right in the middle. The first thing I would like to do to start off today's lesson is to run our application inside of the Pixel 2 emulator. And what you'll notice right off the bat is that we're missing the username and also the profile image for all of these latest message rows inside of this file called latest message activity. And what we would like to replace these guys with is the profile image view for the user that we're chatting with, as well as the username in the bold right over there, right? So let me kind of show you how to do that right now by going back into latest messages activity, which is this screen. And let's scroll down a little bit into latest message row. And what I want to do now is to actually show you how we can modify the username by accessing the view holder and accessing item view. And on this item view, we have this thing called a username text view for the latest message row. And that comes from this guy over here. So this is the username and that's the ID, right? So on this object here, you can say text and you can set it to whatever the heck you want. So let's just type that here and let me hot reload inside of the emulator. And you'll see that change immediately inside of each one of the rows for your RecyclerView, right? So pretty simple stuff there. And now the real question is, how exactly do we figure out the correct username for the user that we're actually chatting with, right? Well, you can do that by looking at this chat message object inside of your constructor, so chat message. And there are a couple of things that you can use to figure out what the username is. And so there's a from ID and also a to ID on this chat message object. And you really want to figure out who the chat partner, like that, what this chat partner ID is. So let me type out some logic here. And so I want to perform an if check on the chat message dot from ID, okay? So if the from ID is equal to the currently logged in user, you can use the Firebase auth get instance and UID, that's the currently logged in user. If it is equal to each other, then I know that the chat partner ID is actually the chat message dot to ID, like that. Otherwise, I know for sure that the chat partner ID is actually equal to the chat message right here dot from ID, like so. And the reason why you have to perform this check is because sometimes the message is going to and from users inside of your application, and you don't know exactly what the chat partner ID is. So make sure to include this logic. And what I want to do with this chat partner ID is to actually fetch the user inside of my database over here, right? So I want to fetch the user inside of this node over there. So if you refresh, you'll actually see the nodes. And let's see, we want to fetch the user inside of here somewhere. And the chat partner ID is going to be one of these IDs. And then we can pull in the user name, kind of like that. So let's continue on here. And to kind of fetch a user, we want to say val reference equals Firebase database, get the instance, and then we'll get a reference like that. We'll go into the user's node, and this guy will be chat partner ID. Okay, so the reference we can say listener, and we will simply use a single event listener like that. And instead of here, you want to say object and value event listener, brace. On this value event listener, you want to add in this onCanceled method. So let's say onCanceled, and let's just remove the autocomplete. And there's one more method that you have to implement called onDataChange. So let's just hit that. And on the data change, this listener, you can actually tell exactly what the user is by checking this P0 guy right there. You can say P0.getValue with the class of user and use the user class type like so. Now what you can do with this user is you can check what the username is on this object like that. And that's pretty much how you figure out what the username is to fill in for these bolded text views right there. Okay, so one last thing that you have to do is to actually cut this code for the actual username. And I'll just paste it inside the data change. And for the text on the right side, we'll say user, and we'll use a question mark for the optional. And we'll just remove that one line like so. Let me try to reload this inside of my emulator. And you'll notice that once the rows show up like so, you'll see the username being filled out inside of your RecyclerView. Okay, so that's kind of how we get the username for the user that we're actually chatting with. So that's the chat partner, or at least that's what I'm calling it. And now what we're missing is the user profile image on the left side. So let me show you how to actually get to that and replace the star with the profile image by doing something kind of similar, but we're going to use Picasso to actually load this image, and this guy will come from the user.profileImage URL. And again, these are all just properties that exists on the user nodes, kind of like that. So profile image URL. And what we can do is we can load this profile image URL into some kind of target. So the target is actually just this. So target image view equals, let's see, we have the view holder dot item view, and we'll say image view, and it comes from the row for the latest message. And so let me just pop that in there and reload one more time. And hopefully you'll see the image showing up on the left side right there. So that's kind of how everything works right now. And if you want to use the circle image view, you can modify the latest message row to be a circle image view instead. And I guess I'll do that right now. And so let me go up to the text over here. And for the actual image view, I'm going to use the circle image view like that. If you want to pop out the preview, you can click that button over there. And so the circle image view is just that. And then what you can also do is to give it a border width. So border width, and I'll use maybe 4dp. That looks pretty good to me. And I'll try to rerun this inside of the emulator, and we'll see what happens. Sometimes the hot reload doesn't exactly work. And we'll run this one more time, and you'll see your circle image view like so. It's a little bit smaller than probably what my design really wants. So I'll bump it up to 72dp instead. And let's see if I can hot reload this inside of my emulator. And that doesn't look so good. So let me try to run it again. And so with a 72dp, the circle is a little bit larger than it was before. If you want to modify the text over here to be a different size, you can say text, let's see, size like that. And you can say something like 16dp maybe. For the actual message, I think we have 18dp for the text size, or SP rather. So we want to change that to SP. If you actually want to change the text to be something else, you can use the tools library, I believe, and say text equals something. So this is the username like that. And I believe you can just remove this over here. And this guy will actually not show up while you are launching your application code. So let me just run this one more time. And so the point of that is to actually not have the flashing effect for the username text right over there. Okay, so everything up to this point looks pretty good for our RecyclerView, right? One thing that you can do is to add in a horizontal line, kind of like that, for your RecyclerView. And the way to do that is to go inside of the latest message activity, which is this guy. And for the RecyclerView, you can say add item decoration. And if I remember correctly, you can say decoration item or something like that. Let me try to get this correctly. See, decoration item, divider item decoration is what it's called. And construct one with the context of this. And then the orientation is divider item decoration and vertical like so. And you can rerun this inside of your app. You'll get that horizontal line to show up like that. Okay, so that's pretty good. And the next thing that I would like to kind of show you how to do is to click on one of these rows inside of your RecyclerView, right? And upon clicking into these rows, you actually want to launch into the ChatLogActivity, which is obviously this screen. And how exactly do you do that? Well, you actually have to do something with the adapter for your RecyclerView, but before I show you the modification for that code, I would like to refactor this class out of this file because it's kind of messy right now. So what I will do is I will cut all of this code, the latest message row, and it really belongs inside of these views. So why don't I create a new Kotlin class? And this guy, I'll call it latest message and row, hit the enter, and I'll just paste all that code in there. The elements that you want to import, you just want to click OK. And everything should be okay with this file. You want to go back into the message activity and you want to import this by hitting Control Space and grab this guy from the new file that you just created. And everything should be okay. Let me try to run this code inside of the emulator just to make sure and confirm everything is okay. And that looks fine to me. And so what I would like to move on to now is to actually click on one of these rows and send myself into the ChatLogActivity for Jamie Lannister and Ygritte, right? So the way that you would actually do that, so set item click listener on your adapter. Okay, so how exactly do you actually do this? Well, you can say adapter, and this is just the adapter that belongs to your RecyclerView. I believe it's down here, so the groupie adapter. And the adapter kind of tells you exactly what's happening whenever you interact with your RecyclerView. And one thing that you can do on this guy is to set an item click listener like this. So we'll use this one right here. And the click listener will actually tell you which item you're clicking on in terms of the row. And it also tells you the view as well. And I'm not exactly using these. So I'll just hit tab, and let's just hit enter over here. Okay, so that's kind of what we're working with right now. And you can perhaps say log D, so D. And do I have a tag for this class? Let's just hit tag. And we'll hit a, let's see, 1, 2, 3 like so. The tag I'll just create up here as a companion object. So val tag equals latest. So let me type latest messages, and I'll try to run this code right now. And let me open up the logcat to show you this inside of the console. So let me tab that a couple of times. We'll get 1, 2, 3, and we'll get 1, 2, 3 for Ygritte as well. Okay, so that's pretty good. And instead of just printing out 1, 2, 3, right, we actually want to perform some action whenever we click on something. And that action is to actually start some kind of activity. And the activity we will have to create using this intent object. And that's just how Android works. The intent, we will use the context of this and then the actual class. We need to load the ChatLogActivity. So let's pull in the class like that. And then all we got to do is to start the activity with that particular event. And so let me try to reload this inside of my app one more time. And what you'll get is every time I click on one of these rows, right, it actually loads the ChatLogActivity. And so let me go back and load the activity for Ygritte. And the problem right now is it doesn't exactly know which user you're clicking onto. And that's the reason why this entire screen is blank. So we click on this and it's blank, right? And so the problem here is whenever you click on new message and you click on, let's say, egret, it actually loads all the messages. And the reason why it's doing this is because inside of the new message activity, which is this screen over here, right? Every time we're inside of here, we are applying the same type of logic, adapter, set item, click listener, and we are putting a user into the actual intent. And then later on in the ChatLogActivity, we are actually grabbing the user by using this thing called a get parcelable extra from the actual intent. All right, so hopefully you remember what that logic is doing. We're going to try to implement the same logic inside of this activity. Let's see, set on item click listener right over here. And I guess in other words, we want to say intent.put extra, and we want to put something with a name and then some kind of value. And the thing I'm going to actually use is the user key, and we can actually just import it using the new message activity and the user key, and we can say comma, and then right over here we need some kind of user. And so this logic is very similar to what we're doing over here. We're putting the extra, the user key comes from new message activity, and we're putting some kind of user over here. And so again, if you go back to latest message activity, we're trying to do the same thing, but we're really missing the user over here. And so we are missing the two, let's see, chat partner user, really. So in other words, whenever we click on this guy right here, we're missing the chat partner user, kind of. But if you think about what we just did, right, we figured out what the chat partner user was. We figured out the username and also the profile image. And so I'm just going to go back to latest message row here, and we figure out exactly what the user is on this line, line 31, by listening into Firebase database. And I'm just going to capture this user into a variable for this row. And so var, and we'll say, you know, chat partner user. And let's just create a variable of type user, and we'll set it to null as the initial value. And what we can do with this variable here is to just replace the actual data change listener. And for the user, we'll just paste that in there, and we'll just replace that and replace that as well. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is every time we are loading these rows, we're also capturing the chat partner user inside of this variable on line 18. And the question now is, what is the point of doing all of that, right? So if I comment out that one error line, you can run your code again and everything's going to work fine. And we haven't really modified anything yet. So if you click on these rows here, you'll still get a blank ChatLogActivity. And what you can do with this on item click listener guy is you can actually figure out what the user is per row. And the way you do that is actually check one of these variables right here. And so whenever you click on one of these rows, it actually tells you which item you're clicking onto. And this item is over here, this item variable. And this guy is actually one of the latest message rows. So let me get rid of that bang and message row. And you can say row equals all of that. And because we just created this chat partner, see chat partner user on that row, we can access it like this. And if you're unfamiliar with this as syntax, we are essentially casting this item into a latest message row because inside of our recycler view, that's the only type of row we have. So this is what we call a safe casting. And then for the actual chat partner user, we grab it from the row like that. And so what I can do right over here is I can uncomment out that line. And for these question marks here, I can just paste in the row.chatPartnerUser. And with all of that, you can just run your code again. And every time you click on a user now, for example, Jamie Lannister, you can load all the messages that you have between the currently logged in user and the person you're clicking onto. So click on egret, you'll see egret on the right side. And then click on Jamie Lannister, you'll also see Jamie Lannister right there. Okay, so that's kind of how we figure out which user we're clicking onto in the latest message activity. We capture it inside of the row over here as the chat partner user. And then at the very end, whenever we're clicking onto the rows, we'll just pass it into the intent over here as the user key. and chat partner user. We start up the intent for our ChatLogActivity, and then the ChatLogActivity does all of the heavy lifting that we've already implemented inside of here. And then it just goes on its merry way to load all the messages kind of like that. Okay, so hopefully that's not too confusing, and you'll probably have to look at the logic a couple of times to make sure that you're following along. One last thing I would like to maybe do here is whenever we click into one of these ChatLogActivity screens, you'll notice that it doesn't exactly start at the very bottom of the list there. And the way that you can maybe fix that is to go inside of ChatLogActivity here. And every time you are listening for the messages for your chat log, you can actually scroll the view on child added. So you can say RecyclerView of chat log, and you can scroll to position. And the position is going to come from the adapter for your RecyclerView. You can say item count and just -1 like that. And hopefully this works. I believe it should. So let's go back over here, go inside of Igrit. It'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. Go back to Jamie Lannister, and it starts at the bottom every time you start on this screen here. Okay everybody, I think I'm going to wrap up today's video right here. I don't really want to introduce too much code in one lesson, and so in the very next video we are going to look at how we can modify the navigation bar to fit the style that we're looking for. Alright, so hopefully you guys can look forward to that. Keep on coding, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye bye guys.